The fires burned on 3 different planets that Admiral Kethfer could see from his ship. Red flames, blue flames, and something that looked like green lightning dancing across the surface of worlds that used to be home to billions of people. Now they were empty rocks covered in ash and death. Kethfer pressed his 4-fingered hand against the cold metal wall of his command bridge. The Galactic Federation was losing this war. Not just losing a few battles here and there. They were getting crushed so badly that even the bravest soldiers were starting to talk about running away to the far edge of space where maybe, just maybe, the enemy would not find them. The enemy called themselves the Vorthok. 3 years ago, nobody in the galaxy had ever heard that name. Now it was the word that made children cry and grown warriors shake with fear. The Vorthok did not just want to beat the Federation, they wanted to eat it, literally. Their ships were not made of metal and circuits like normal space vessels. Vorthok ships were alive. They grew like plants, healed like animals, and thought like a single massive brain spread across thousands of vessels. When you shot at one Vorthok ship, somehow all the other ships learned how to avoid that same attack. When you killed one of their warriors, the rest of them became stronger and smarter. Commander Lethera walked across the bridge toward him. Her blue skin looked pale under the emergency lighting. The Centaurian officer had fought in wars before, but nothing like this. She carried a datapad in her 3 hands, and Kethfer already knew the news would be bad. These days, all news was bad. "Admiral, we lost the Outer Rim defense grid," she said. Her voice was steady, but he could hear the fear underneath. "All 27 stations are gone. The Vorthok broke through our lines completely." Kethfer nodded. Slowly, he had expected this. The defense grid was supposed to be the strongest fortress in Federation space. It had enough firepower to destroy entire solar systems. The Vorthok had taken it apart in less than 8 hours. "How many ships did we lose?" he asked. "Everything, sir. 600 vessels, 40,000 crew members. The few escape pods we detected were caught by Vorthok collectors." Lethera paused. They both knew what that meant. The Vorthok did not take prisoners. They took food. The bridge crew worked quietly around them. Most of these officers had served together for years. They had won battles against pirates, stopped civil wars, and kept peace across 100 different worlds. But the Vorthok were not pirates or rebels. They were something else entirely. Something that ate civilizations.
Ow.
"About the core worlds?" Kethfer asked. "Council is meeting now. They want to discuss surrender terms." The words hit him like a physical blow. Surrender. After 3 years of fighting? After losing millions of people? After watching entire species disappear forever? The Federation was ready to give up. Maybe they were right. Maybe there was no point in sending more people to die through the main viewing screen. He could see other Federation ships floating in space around them. Most were damaged. All of them were running low on supplies, ammunition, and hope. The great fleet that had once numbered in the tens of thousands was now down to a few hundred vessels hiding in empty space. Between the stars, Lieutenant Gorthek, a young Drakmarian officer, approached from the communications station. His reptilian features showed confusion. "Admiral, we received a strange message through the quantum relay network." "From who?" "System called Sol, a species that calls themselves humans. They want to join the war." Several officers on the bridge made sounds that might have been laughter. If the situation were not so serious, new species contacted the Federation all the time, usually asking for protection or trade agreements. But wanting to join a war that the Federation was clearly losing seemed like madness. "What do they offer?" Kethfer asked, mostly out of curiosity. "They say they have been watching our conflict and believe they can help end it." This time the laughter was real. Commander Lethera shook her head. "Sir, according to our records, this human species has not even developed faster than light travel. They are trapped in their own solar system."
What could they possibly do against the Vorthok?
It was a fair question. The Vorthok had destroyed civilizations that had been traveling between stars for thousands of years. What could a primitive species that had never left their home system do to help? But as Kethfer looked out at the burning planets, at his broken fleet, At the faces of officers who had given up hope, he found himself considering the impossible. Maybe desperation made people think crazy thoughts. Maybe sometimes crazy thoughts were the only ones worth having. "Send a reply," he said. "Finally, tell them we will hear what they have to say." The communications officer looked surprised. "Sir, the Council will not approve first contact with a primitive species during wartime." "The Council is discussing surrender," Kethfer replied. "I think we are past worrying about normal procedures." As the message was sent toward the distant Sol system, Kethfer wondered if he was making a mistake. The humans were probably just another species that would be consumed by the Vorthok war machine. But right now, even false hope was better than no hope at all. The war was almost over. The Federation was almost dead. And somewhere in the darkness of space, a species called humanity was asking to join the fight. Maybe they would all die together. At least they would not die alone. Captain Jake Morrison stepped off the small human transport ship and into the docking bay of the Federation flagship. The artificial gravity felt different from Earth normal, making his stomach twist slightly. Behind him followed 11 other humans. The entire diplomatic team that Earth had sent to meet with the largest military force in the galaxy. The docking bay was huge. Morrison had seen pictures of Federation ships before, but being inside one made him feel like an ant walking through a cathedral. Ceilings stretched high above them, and alien machinery hummed with sounds he did not recognize. But what really caught his attention were the aliens themselves. Admiral Kethfer was the first to greet them. The Zephyrian stood almost 8 feet tall, with gray skin and 4 arms that moved like water. His large black eyes studied the humans with what Morrison hoped was curiosity rather than hunger. Behind him stood other officers from different species across the galaxy. "Welcome aboard the Star Cutter," Admiral Kethfer said through a translation, device that made his voice sound like wind through metal. "I must admit, your request to join our war effort has caused much discussion among my staff." Morrison nodded respectfully. "Admiral, thank you for agreeing to meet with us. I know our species is unknown to you, and our technology seems primitive compared to yours." A large reptilian creature that looked like a walking crocodile stepped forward. This was General Korth of the Drakmarian military. When he spoke, his voice was like rocks grinding together. "Captain Morrison, your species has not even achieved faster than light travel. You live on one planet in one system. Vorthok have destroyed entire star empires. What exactly do you think 12 humans can do?" Several other alien officers made sounds that Morrison guessed were their versions of laughter. He understood their reaction. From their point of view, it must look like children offering to help adults fight a dragon. Colonel Lisa Grant stepped forward beside Morrison. She was shorter than him, but carried herself like someone who had seen many battles. "General Korth, may I ask how long you have been fighting the Vorthok?" 3 years, the reptilian answered. 3 years of losing battles, losing worlds, losing hope. And in those 3 years, have you won any major victories against them? General Korth's eyes narrowed. "A few, but they adapt quickly. Every tactic we use works once, maybe twice. Then they learn, and it never works again." Dr. Nina Vasquez opened her data pad and activated a holographic display. She was the team's expert on alien biology, though she had never seen a real alien until today. That is exactly the problem. We are fighting them like they are machines or computers. No, but they are not. They are biological creatures, which means they have biological weaknesses. Commander Lothara moved closer to look at the human's display. It showed images of Earth creatures, things that looked strange and alien to the Federation officers. "What are these?" "Life forms from our planet," Dr. Vasquez explained. "We have studied biological warfare for thousands of years, not by choice, but because everything on our world is trying to eat everything else. We learned that biological systems, no matter how advanced, have limits." Morrison activated his own display, showing scenes from human military history, battles from ancient times to recent conflicts. On Earth, we have a saying. It is not the size of the dog in the fight, but the size of the fight in the dog. The alien officers looked at the images with interest. They saw humans fighting with primitive weapons against larger, stronger enemies. They saw strategies that seemed to make no sense, yet somehow worked. Your species fights very differently than ours, observed Admiral Kethver. These tactics are not what we would call honorable. Colonel Grant smiled, but it was not a happy expression, Admiral. Honor is a luxury for those who are not facing extinction. When your enemy wants to eat your children, honor becomes less important than survival. Captain Morrison pulled up a new display showing the current war situation. The Vorthok advance, the Federation retreat, the planet's burning in space. You have been fighting the Vorthok like civilized beings fighting other civilized beings. But the Vorthok are not civilized. They are predators. And the only way to beat a predator is to become a better predator. The room fell silent. Morrison could see the alien officers thinking about his words. Some looked shocked. Others looked interested. A few looked disgusted. Dr. Vasquez continued the presentation. The Vorthok share consciousness across their entire fleet. This gives them great coordination, but it also creates a single point of failure. If we can affect one ship, we can affect them all. Impossible, said Fleet Commander Zethlock, a tall being with blue skin and no hair. We have tried every form of communication jamming known to science. Nothing disrupts their bio-neural network. That is because you are trying to jam their communications, Morrison said. We are not talking about jamming. We are talking about weaponizing their connection. It's turning their greatest strength into their greatest weakness. Commander Alex Carter, the youngest member of the human team, activated another display. One showed swarm behaviors from Earth, bees, ants, flocks of birds, schools of fish. Every swarm in nature has exploitable patterns. The Vorthok may be advanced, but they are still following biological rules. Admiral Kethver studied the human displays carefully. What exactly are you proposing, Captain Morrison? Morrison looked around the room at all the alien faces. Some were curious, some were skeptical, and some were desperate enough to listen to anything. Give us 5 hours with your remaining fleet. Let us show you how humans fight when everything is on the line. The silence that followed was so complete that Morrison could hear his own heartbeat. Finally, General Korth spoke. 5 hours to do what we could not do in 3 years? 5 hours to end this war? Morrison replied calmly. The alien officers looked at each other. They had complex conversations in languages Morrison could not understand. Finally, Admiral Kethver spoke. Captain Morrison, your confidence is either inspiring or insane. I am not sure which. On Earth, those two things are often the same. Morrison answered. The meeting continued for several more hours, with the humans explaining their unconventional approach to warfare. By the end, half the alien officers thought they were crazy. The other half thought they might be the salvation the galaxy needed. Admiral Kethver would make the final decision. But Morrison could see the desperate hope in the alien's large black eyes. When you were facing extinction, even crazy ideas started to look reasonable. The war room of the Federation flagship was packed with alien officers from across the galaxy. Captain Morrison stood at the center of the room, surrounded by beings who had fought wars for centuries longer than humans had existed. The holographic displays showed the current battle positions, and the situation looked hopeless. The Vorthok fleet was massive. Over 10,000 bioships were moving toward the last Federation stronghold at Nexus Prime. Each ship was alive, breathing, and connected to all the others through invisible threads of shared thought. Against this force, the Federation had less than 800 damaged vessels. The numbers do not lie, said Fleet Commander Zethlock. Even if every one of our shots destroys a Vorthok ship, we will still be outnumbered 12-1. This is not a battle. This is suicide. Morrison nodded. You are right, Commander. If we fight them the way you have been fighting for 3 years, we will all be dead in a few hours. That is why we are not going to fight them that way. Dr. Nina Vasquez stepped forward and changed the display to show biological diagrams. Strange shapes and patterns filled the air above them. The Vorthok are not just individual ships working. Together, they are a single organism spread across thousands of bodies. When one feels pain, they all feel pain. When one feels fear, they all feel fear. We know this, interrupted General Korth. It makes them impossible to surprise and difficult to defeat. Their shared consciousness is their greatest advantage. No, said Colonel Lisa Grant firmly. Their shared consciousness will be their downfall. You have been trying to kill them cleanly, like soldiers fighting soldiers. But humans learned a long time ago that sometimes the goal is not to kill the enemy. Sometimes the goal is to break them. The alien officers looked confused. Commander Lathara spoke for many of them. Break them how? Captain Morrison activated a new display showing scenes from Earth's history. Battles where smaller forces had defeated larger ones through unusual tactics. On our world, we discovered that the mind is often weaker than the body. You can destroy someone without killing them. You can win a war without winning battles. Commander Alex Carter pulled up biological data from Earth. Images of animals in distress, creatures showing fear responses, examples of how panic could spread through groups. Every biological system has limits, even the Vorthok. They may be advanced, but they still have nervous systems, still have brains, still have instincts that can be triggered. Admiral Kethfer studied the human displays carefully. His forearms moved in patterns that Morrison had learned meant deep thought. You were talking about psychological warfare. We have tried some basic forms of it. The Vorthok seem immune to fear or pain. That is because you tried to make them afraid of dying, Morrison replied. But death is not the worst thing that can happen to a thinking creature. There are things worse than death. Things that make death seem like mercy. The room fell silent. Morrison could see that his words had made many of the aliens uncomfortable. These were civilized beings who fought wars with rules and honor. What he was suggesting went against everything they believed about proper warfare. Dr. Vasquez brought up new data, chemical formulas, biological processes, neural pathway diagrams. The Vorthok communicate through biochemical signals, sense hormones, electrical impulses between their ships. We can use those same pathways to deliver other signals. Signals that trigger responses they cannot control. What kind of responses? Asked Fleet Commander Zethlock. Panic, terror, confusion, despair, pain that has no source, fear that has no reason. Imagine feeling like you are drowning when you are not in water. Imagine feeling like you are falling when you are standing still. Imagine experiencing the death of everyone you have ever cared about, over and over again. Several alien officers made sounds of disgust. General Korth stood up from his chair. This is not warfare. This is torture.
Colonel?
Grant faced him directly. General, how many of your people have the Vorthok killed? How many worlds have they consumed? How many children have they eaten? And you are worried about being fair to them? We are civilized beings, General Korth replied. We do not use such methods. And that is why you are losing, Morrison said. Quietly, the Vorthok are not civilized. They do not follow your rules. They do not care about honor or fairness. They care about feeding. And they will keep feeding until everything in this galaxy is dead. Commander Alex Carter activated another display. This one showed the Vorthok bioneural network as a web of connections. Look at their network structure. One disruption here. He pointed to a key node, causes cascade failures throughout the entire system. Their greatest strength becomes their greatest weakness. Admiral Kethfer moved closer to the display. How do you deliver these psychological attacks? Our weapons are designed to destroy ships, not minds. We modify your existing systems, Dr. Vasquez explained. Your ships already have the ability to broadcast signals, release chemicals, generate electromagnetic fields. We just change what those systems do. Instead of trying to kill Vorthok ships, we drive them insane. Morrison pulled up the final part of their plan. It showed Federation ships moving in strange patterns, releasing clouds of synthetic chemicals, broadcasting signals. That would seem like noise to most species, but would be pure terror to the Vorthok. The beauty of this approach is that it spreads, Morrison continued. When one Vorthok ship experiences trauma, that trauma is shared across their entire network instantly. We do not need to attack 10,000 ships. We only need to attack one, and the effect reaches everyone. The alien officers studied the human plan in silence. Morrison could see them struggling with the moral implications. These were beings who had spent centuries trying to be better than their primitive ancestors. What the humans were suggesting felt like a step backward into darkness. Finally, Admiral Kethfer spoke. "Captain Morrison, your plan is unlike anything we have considered. It goes against everything we believe about honorable warfare." Admiral Morrison replied, "Honor is something you can afford when you are winning. When you are facing extinction, survival becomes more important than honor. The question is simple. Do you want to die with honor, or do you want to live?" The room was quiet for a long moment. Then Commander Lethera asked the question that everyone was thinking. "If we do this, if we use your methods to defeat the Vorthok, what does that make us?" Morrison looked around the room at all the alien faces. "It makes you alive," he said simply. "And sometimes that is enough." The debate continued for another hour, but Morrison could see that desperation was winning over honor. When extinction was the alternative, even the most civilized beings were willing to consider darker methods. The plan was approved. In 6 hours, they would put human tactics to the ultimate test against an enemy that had conquered half the galaxy. The battle began at exactly 0800 Galactic Standard Time. Lieutenant Ben Torres sat in the pilot seat of his modified fighter craft, watching the Vorthok armada approach through the darkness of space. 10,000 bioships moved like a living wall of death, their organic hulls pulsing with alien light. "All units, this is Captain Morrison," came the voice through the communication system. "Remember, we are not trying to destroy them. We are trying to break them. Stay alive, follow the plan, and trust that this will work." Torres gripped his controls tighter. His small fighter had been completely rebuilt by human engineers over the past 6 hours. Where normal ships carried laser cannons and missile launchers, his craft now carried tanks of synthetic chemicals and broadcasting, equipment that could send signals across multiple frequencies. The Vorthok fleet spread out as it approached, their ships moving in perfect coordination. Torres had studied recordings of previous battles, and the enemy always fought the same way. They shared information instantly, adapted to threats immediately, and never made the same mistake twice. But today would be different. Today, the Federation was fighting like humans. "Torres, you are clear for first strike." Colonel Grant's voice crackled through his headset. "Remember, target the lead ships. The effect will spread from there." Torres dove his fighter toward the center of the Vorthok formation. Enemy bioships immediately began firing at him, but he was not trying to avoid them. He was trying to get as close as possible. His ship shook as alien weapons struck his shields. But he kept flying straight into the heart of their fleet. At the last second, he activated his payload. Clouds of synthetic pheromones erupted from his ship, invisible. Chemicals that had been designed specifically to trigger fear responses in biological nervous systems. The compounds spread quickly through the vacuum of space, carried by the same bioparticles that the Vorthok used to communicate between ships. The effect was immediate. The lead Vorthok ships began to move erratically, their smooth coordination breaking down as primitive terror flooded their shared consciousness. Through their bioneural network, the fear spread like a disease. Jumping from ship to ship faster than any weapon could travel, Commander Sarah Blake led the second wave of attack. Her squadron carried subsonic resonators, devices that could generate sound waves at frequencies that caused nausea and confusion in organic brains. Even in the vacuum of space, the waves traveled through the biomatter that connected the Vorthok ships. "Resonators active," Blake reported as her ships released their sonic payload. "I can see them starting to lose formation." Across the battlefield, hundreds of Vorthok ships suddenly began spinning and weaving as their pilots experienced violent dizziness. The sensation rippled through their network, causing thousands of warriors to become sick and disoriented simultaneously. But the real breakthrough came when Dr. Kate Russell activated her neurological warfare suite. She had spent the past 6 hours analyzing captured Vorthok biosamples, learning how their nervous systems worked, discovering what chemicals could trigger specific responses in their alien brains. "Phase 3 beginning now," Dr. Russell announced from her position aboard the command ship. "Deploying psychoactive compounds." Her specially modified vessel released a cloud of microscopic spores into space. These spores were designed to mimic the natural bioparticles that the Vorthok used for ship-to-ship communication, but they carried a deadly cargo. Each spore contained chemicals that would cause hallucinations, paranoia, and overwhelming despair in any Vorthok that absorbed them. The spores spread through the enemy fleet like wildfire. Within minutes, Vorthok warriors across thousands of ships began experiencing terrifying visions. They saw their ships melting around them, felt their bodies dissolving, experienced the sensation of being eaten alive by invisible creatures. Major Chris Parker coordinated the final phase of the attack. His team had studied the Vorthok bioneural network and identified the specific frequencies that carried emotional signals between ships. They began broadcasting patterns designed to trigger mass panic responses. Panic induction at maximum, Parker reported. The entire network is being flooded with terror signals. Results were beyond what even the humans had hoped for. The Vorthok fleet, which had moved as one perfect organism just minutes before, now thrashed in space like a wounded animal. Ships began firing at each other, their crews unable to tell friend from foe, through the haze of chemically induced fear and confusion. Admiral Kethfer watched from the bridge of his flagship, his forearms hanging limp at his sides. "This is not possible," he whispered. 10,000 ships, reduced to chaos in less than 3 hours. Through the viewing screen, he could see Vorthok bioships turning on each other, their organic weapons tearing into vessels that had been their allies. Moments before, the shared consciousness that had made them so powerful was now spreading trauma and terror to every member of their fleet. Captain Morrison stood beside him, watching the destruction with grim satisfaction. Their network is overloading. Every ship is experiencing the trauma of every other ship. They're feeling the fear and pain of 10,000 vessels all at once. Commander Alex Carter monitored the bioneural signals from his station. The cascade effect is accelerating. They are trapped in a feedback loop of terror. Each ship makes the others more afraid, which makes them more afraid, which makes the others even more afraid. By the 4th hour, the mighty Vorthok armada was completely broken. Ships fled in all directions, their crews driven insane by the psychological assault. Those that remained behind were attacking anything that moved, including each other. "My God," whispered Fleet Commander Zethlock. "What have we done?" "We won," Morrison replied simply. "The war is over." As the 5th hour approached, the last of the Vorthok ships were either fleeing or destroying themselves. The bioneural network that had once connected a galaxy-spanning empire was now a conduit for nothing but madness and despair. The Federation had achieved total victory without firing a single traditional weapon. The most powerful military force in galactic history had been defeated not by superior firepower, but by the simple human understanding that sometimes the mind is more fragile than the body. Torres flew his fighter back to Ward, the Federation fleet, his mission complete. Behind him, the space where the Vorthok armada had been was now filled with drifting wreckage and the fading echoes of alien screams that would haunt the void for years to come. 2 weeks after the battle, Captain Morrison stood in the observation deck of the Federation flagship, watching refugee ships return to their home worlds. The galaxy was free again, but the victory felt different than he had expected. There was no celebration, no cheering crowds, no victory parades, just silence and the slow work of rebuilding. Admiral Kethfer approached him slowly. Zephyrian's forearms moved in patterns that Morrison had learned meant deep thought and confusion. "Captain, I have been studying reports from across the galaxy. The Vorthok Empire has completely collapsed. Our military forces have surrendered or fled beyond the galactic rim. Worlds that they controlled for years are now empty, their populations simply gone." Morrison nodded. He had expected this. When you broke the mind of a species that shared consciousness, the damage spread everywhere. What about the Vorthok themselves? The few we have captured are completely broken. They cannot speak, cannot function, cannot even feed themselves. Our medical teams say they may never recover. Admiral Kethfer paused. Some of my officers are calling this a war crime. Through the viewing window, Morrison could see planets that were slowly coming back to life. Cities rebuilding, trade routes reopening, children playing in streets that had been empty for years. But he could also see the cost of their victory in the Admiral's large black eyes. Dr. Nina Vasquez joined them at the window. Her datapad showed psychological profiles of captured Vorthok warriors. "The trauma is permanent," she said quietly. "Their shared consciousness means they all experienced every moment of terror simultaneously. Imagine feeling the death of your entire species over and over again. No mind can survive that." Commander Lothara entered the observation deck, carrying official documents. "Captain Morrison, the Federation Council has completed their review of the battle. They want to offer humanity full membership in the galactic community, along with positions in the military command structure." Morrison took the documents, but did not look at them immediately. "What are the conditions?" "They want us to establish military academies throughout Federation space. They want human officers to train alien forces in what they are calling unconventional warfare tactics." Lothara hesitated. "We want to learn to fight like humans." The room fell quiet. Morrison could feel the weight of that request. The Federation had spent thousands of years trying to become more civilized, more peaceful, more honorable in their approach to conflict. Now, they wanted to learn the darker methods that humanity had developed through millions of years of survival. "Colonel," Lisa Grant entered the room with her own reports. "The Vorthok were not the only threat out there. Our deep space sensors have detected at least 6 other hostile civilizations beyond Federation borders. The Council believes that traditional warfare will not be enough to stop them." Admiral Kethfer looked out at the stars. "We invited you here to help us win one war, but I think we may have changed the nature of warfare itself. The galaxy will never fight the same way again." Dr. Kate Russell arrived with the final battle analysis. "The psychological weapons we used were specifically designed for Vorthok biology, but the basic principles can be adapted for any species. Fear, pain, confusion, despair, these are universal responses among thinking creatures." Morrison finally looked at the Federation documents. They offered humanity technology, resources, and a place among the stars. But they also asked humans to teach the galaxy how to wage war without honor, how to win at any cost, how to break enemies rather than simply defeat them. "There is something else," Admiral Kethfer said slowly. "Some council members are concerned about humanity itself. They worry that a species capable of such tactics might someday turn those weapons against the Federation." The statement hung in the air like a threat. Morrison could understand their fear. Humanity had just demonstrated that they could destroy civilizations not through superior technology or numbers, but through pure psychological warfare. That was a terrifying power to have as either an ally or an enemy. "Commander," Alex Carter spoke from his position at the sensor station. "Captain, we are receiving a priority message from Earth. The government wants to know if we are coming home." Morrison considered the question carefully. Earth seemed very far away now, both in distance and in meaning. Humanity had stepped onto the galactic stage and shown the universe what they were capable of. There was no going back to being a single planet. Species hiding in their own solar system. "What do you think, Colonel?" Morrison asked Grant. "Do we accept their offer?" Grant looked around the room at the alien faces watching them. "The galaxy needs protection from threats like the Vorthok. And like it or not, we are the only species that has proven capable of stopping them. The question is whether we can trust ourselves with that power." Dr. Vasquez closed her datapad. "The Vorthok Empire controlled half the galaxy through fear and violence. If we take the Federation's offer, we will be teaching them to control the other half through psychological warfare. Is that really better?" Morrison walked to the window and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there were 6 other hostile civilizations that might threaten the Federation. Somewhere out there were species that had never heard of humanity, but might someday need to be stopped. Somewhere out there were alien children who deserved to grow up free from fear. "Send a message to the Federation Council," Morrison said finally. "Tell them we accept their offer, but with conditions. Human military instructors will teach defensive tactics only. We will not help any species wage aggressive war, and we will not share our most dangerous weapons with anyone." Admiral Kethfer's mandibles clicked, and what Morrison had learned was approval. If the Council refuses those conditions, Morrison smiled, but it was not a pleasant expression. Then they can face the next galactic threat without us. I think they will find that experience educational. 3 days later, the first human military academy was established on the Federation capital world. Students from dozens of species came to learn the art of war from teachers who had never lost a conflict that mattered. The galaxy was safe, but it had learned a hard lesson about the price of survival. In the end, humanity had saved the galaxy by showing it how to be human. Whether that was salvation or damnation remained to be seen. But as Captain Morrison watched, alien cadets learning to think like predators, he knew that the universe would never be quite the same again. The war was over. The real challenge was just beginning.